So again, I'm Kristine. I have 5 kids. I don't know, some of you have the picture. That's our prayer card. My oldest is 9. My youngest is 2. So we have 9, 8, 6, 3, 2. And my husband and I have been missionaries in Albania for almost 10 years. So a long time. When we moved there, I had a 6-month-old, and now we have 5 kids. So I'm not sure how that happened, but we love Grace Church of the Valley. We're so thankful for this church. We feel so loved and supported and encouraged, and you guys are just in a special spot. There's not many churches like yours that love God's Word, that seek the truth, and that are a light to their communities. So if this is all that you have experienced in your Christian church walk, you're very blessed. So today we are going to talk about trials. Maybe that, I know you guys are doing prayer, but I feel like that can kind of go together, right? Like, just remember that as we talk about this, that we should always be praying, but specifically in the midst of a trial, right? So this is just like a little deviation from what you guys have been talking about. But let's just read James 1. Just to jog our memories. We know this, right? Probably very well. James 1, consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith brings about perseverance. And let perseverance have its perfect work in you, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. We all know this verse, right? I would think that if you have been saved for even a short amount of time, you've heard this verse. And trials, we read here, are given to us by who? By God. What do? They challenge our faith. There are many different kinds of trials, right? Like you can't say, well, a trial has, it's this, or this. They're super different. They could last like a really long time. Like you could go through like a really hard adoption, right? That could be years of a trial. It could be something really short. It could be a relational conflict that gets resolved. It could be public, where you're struggling with your health and everybody comes around you and is able to pray for you. It could be private, where you have something going on that you can't really share with very many people. And there's a few that can pray, but mostly you're kind of walking through it alone. It can be a relationship, health, an internal struggle, death. There's a lot of things that can be classified as a trial, right? And John MacArthur says this, the Christian life can make no distinction. These are just trials in general, and our life is made up of them. They come in the form of disappointments, frustrations, misunderstandings, unfulfilled dreams, unmet expectations, great loss, great loneliness, fear, criticism, persecution, and conflict. That's a really good, extensive list. I said that, not John MacArthur. Now he says this. They all maybe start on the outside. So it's things on the outside, but sooner or later they end up on the inside. And that's what makes them what? A trial. That's life. And all of them come for what? In verse 3 of James it says, for the purpose of testing your faith, to help you see whether your faith is real and how strong your faith is. And there are tests of genuineness for those who claim true faith, and there are tests of the strength of your faith. So I want to say right now, I hope you've gone through a trial, right? If you haven't gone through a trial, you need to ask yourself and God why. Because what do trials do? They test our faith. And it would logically follow that if you have faith, you will be tested through trial, right? They're not, well, I'm a Christian, but I haven't gone through a trial, right? If you are saved, and if you are growing in your walk with the Lord, and if you are pursuing Him, you will be tested through trial. 1 Peter 1, 3 through 7. We can look at that really quick. This is another classic trial verse. if I can say that. Blessed be the God, so 1, 3 through 7. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his great mercy has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to obtain an inheritance, incorruptible and undefiled and unfading, having been kept in heaven for you, who are protected by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that, what? The proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in the praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And though you have not seen him, you love him. And though you do not see him now, but believe in him, you rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of joy, receiving as the outcome of your faith the salvation of your souls. So we often ask God to use us, right? And who's prayed that? Like, have you ever prayed like, God, please use me? Nobody? Oh, some of you? Okay, good. I'm glad you've prayed that. We ask God to use us, and what does he do? We think like, oh, maybe he'll use me to serve someone, or maybe he'll use me to, I don't know, make dessert for something. But really, what does God do when we ask him if he can use us? He gives us a trial, right? I mean, that's my experience. Maybe I'm just worse than the rest of you. But oftentimes I say, God, please use me. And then he gives me a trial. And then I take it back. I don't want to be used anymore. If this is what you did when I asked you for that, I'm never going to ask you that again. But a trial can do one of two things, right? And I don't know where I heard this. I read it somewhere once. So this is not my line. But it can make you bitter or better. And I'm going to change that a little bit, but we'll get into that. So they do one of two things to your character, to your soul, and they affect who you are. The wife you are, the mom you are, the Christian you are, the sister you are. They will make you bitter or better. And I'm going to say bitter or more beautiful, because I just think it will make sense as I go on. So when you think of trials in the Bible, who do you think of? Job. Thank you. Good job. Job. So we're going to look at Job, but we're not actually going to look at Job's response, but we're going to read about Job. Let's read 1:12. Okay. Yahweh said to Satan, I have the Legacy Bible. I don't know what it says in the other versions, but Yahweh said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Who? Job. Only do not send forth your hand toward him. So Satan went out from the presence of Yahweh. And then we know what happens. Then further we read, so God basically says, you can do whatever you want, just don't lay a hand on him. Don't mess with Job. But then he basically destroys Job, leaves him with all but his health. And then Satan goes back and says, well, yeah, he's still alive. So of course he's still hanging on. And then God says what? In 2:4-6. Skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has, he will give for his life. However, send forth your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse your face. This is what Satan says to God. And so God says to Satan, okay, behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life. So now, Job's oxen are destroyed. His sheep are burned. His camels are destroyed. And sometimes I think we read this in modern day and be like, well, he lost some sheep. This is his livelihood, right? Like he lost everything. This is the modern day way of saying he lost all he had. His house, his car, his other house, whatever. He lost it all. Then his sons and daughters die. So this guy has been flattened. He then gets, this for some reason to me is the worst part. He gets boils all over his body. I remember reading this as a kid. And it literally says he's scraping them off himself. And I just remember being like, oh gosh, too much detail, okay? But Job is in a bad spot. He has nothing left. And he's literally left to die, right? And this part just cracks me up, okay? Think about all that Job has lost right now. Satan can do whatever he wants to Job except kill him. What does Satan not take away from Job? His wife. He doesn't take away his wife. Satan's like, I'm going to destroy you, but your wife's just standing right there next to you. Why? Because that is the final blow. Job's wife is literally the final blow to him. What does she say? In 2:9, she says, hold fast. Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. This is this lady's only line in the Bible. That's all she gets. Like, that's it. And you're like, Job's wife, that's all she says. Do you not still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die. And Satan is like, that's why she's right there right now. Okay? So he leaves her there. And she's the final blow. I mean, can you imagine? Job has been destroyed. Everything he has been destroyed. And his wife is the one that tells him to curse God and die. This is super embarrassing for this lady. I don't know if she's going to be in heaven, but when everyone meets her there, and she's like, I'm Job's wife. I know we're made new. I know we're made new in heaven, but I'm glad I'm not her. So what happened to her? She got bitter. So that's what we're saying at the beginning, right? A trial can do one of two things to who you are, and it can make you what? Bitter. That's number one, okay? So bitter means sharp. I mean, you think of bitter food, sour, harsh. Synonyms for bitter are resentful, dissatisfied, discontent. Those are really gross words. And God can't really work with bitter, can he? I mean, if we're making a point. Like, if you become a bitter, resentful, dissatisfied, grudging person, that is not what God is going to use, right? So if we look at James, what are we called to do? We're called to consider it joy. Consider what? He's telling you to do that because it's a response, right? It's a response to a test. And you can blow a test. You can. You can totally blow the trial God is giving you by allowing it to make you bitter, dissatisfied, discontent, grudging, and that's exactly what Job's wife did, right? She saw what was happening, looked around, and she didn't say God's not real, right? She literally says, curse God. So she's not saying, I don't believe in God anymore, this is too hard, a good God wouldn't do this. She doesn't say she doesn't believe in God. She curses who he is. She doesn't say, I'm checking out, I don't believe in this God anymore. She literally says, I don't believe he is who he says he is. He is not what he says he is. He is not good. He is not sovereign. He is not any of the things that he claims to be. And Job, you better curse him because this is ridiculous. And so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. My husband and I are missionaries. We're in Albania. And we've been there for 10 years. And the first few years were unbelievable. Like exactly what you would hope for as a missionary. I don't know what books you've read, but like we are doing camps with thousands of youth where I'm seeing people come to Christ. Our church is growing, and we're like, this is amazing. Everybody should do this. We could come back and be like, we don't know why more people aren't missionaries. They tell you it's hard. This isn't hard. Like, we're on the front line of watching God save lives. Why wouldn't anybody want to do this? Fruit, faith, conversion. Again, exactly what you would pray for. And we're learning the language. We're loving the culture. We love Albania. Our kids are doing great. They're thriving. And then slowly it became more difficult, like so many various ways. Our kids are growing up. We learn the language, so we know more of what's going on. And then we went from this, like, I would say, let's say like a camp high, like a missionary high, right? Like we're like just stoked on missions. We're like making videos. We're just like really excited, and it was exciting. Like God was doing so much. But we went from, slowly it got more difficult. We went through a season of loss and just loss of various things, and a season of spiritual attack where we were surrounded by corruption and people that you pour into turn on you and they turn on the truth. And we were at times surrounded by lies and at times surrounded by very dark, dark sin. And it was just a darkness that I wasn't prepared for. Like I mean, you know how I grew up, the circles that I was in. I wasn't prepared for the darkness. And while I didn't say what Job's wife said, I definitely had those thoughts. Like, let's bail. Like, what are we doing? This is not what we signed up for. How is this going to affect our kids? What is the point of this? And it got to a point where almost it seemed as if everything that we had built into and everyone that we had poured into and everything that was like, okay, well, if I only have this in Albania, that's worth it. Like, if it's only for this person, then it's worth it. And then that person would like walk away from Christ. Or if it's only for this situation, that's worth it. And then that situation would blow up. Or it would be like, well, I'm here for this. And slowly and surely, God like took away all the reasons that I would say if it's only for this. And I know we're going to heaven one day. But I would think like a whole lot of people will get there without doing this. Like, why do I have to go through and choose to be here and do this when like I can go to heaven anyways, right? And like Job's wife, I despaired. And I doubted what? God's goodness, his sovereignty, his love, all the characteristics of God that I know to be true in my mind, but I doubt in my heart. And all the verses that would like encourage me before, they didn't prick my heart. I became I don't believe that God allowed me to become bitter, but I was like right going down that track. In my deepest, darkest moments. Like, what is this? You know? And God stripped away any reason why I could say, this is why we're here. I had no reason. I would just say, I have no idea. I don't know what we're doing. I think we should leave. And I do believe I probably would have said to Corey, like, I'm done. But we had a baby that God gave us right before I would say things got like super, like the worst of the worst. And he gave us a baby that we were fostering, and we literally could not leave the country. So even when I was ready to throw in the towel, God was like, no, sorry. You're still here. So I'm in this time where I'm like, okay, we have this baby. This is why we're staying here. But what the heck, God? Okay. And I picked up this book, and you should all read this book. It is called Ann Judson, and the author is Sharon James. You should definitely read this. It will make you feel super lame. And we all need to feel like that every once in a while, right? So I start reading this book, and I am, like, it just rocks me. I'm like, I was with my kids in the mountains when I started reading it. Corey was away for, like, a seminary class, and I'm, like, reading it with a flashlight in the mountains in Albania, and with my phone flashlight. And this is why I'm going to say bitter or more beautiful, because this woman truly has a beautiful heart for Christ. And so these people, 1800s, the first known missionaries that are sent from America. So obviously there's history that we can't, but they're the first known missionaries that were sent from America, and they go to Burma. Okay, these people are real missionaries. Like, I'm not a real missionary compared to these people. They don't think they're ever going back to America. Some of them would like take their coffins with them. They are the real deal. And this woman goes through just about everything that Job's wife went through. Her kids die. They get diseases. Her husband is in prison. They don't see a single person come to Christ for 7 years. And I mean, this is Burma, but this is like over 100 years ago. Like, this is really deep and dark. And they're working with governments that don't want them there. And I mean, really, what happened to Job happened to them. And for part of the time, she's not even with her husband. He would have to go preach somewhere else. Like, her life is just, it's horrible. Her life is horrible by worldly standards. Like, there is nothing like, oh, but, she had this. No, like, it's all bad. And then I'm reading this, and then at the end, she dies. Like, she doesn't get to see any of the fruit of their labor. Like, she doesn't see any of the fruit of their labor. And that was always like one thing for me that I feel like I was holding on to, like, in our ministry, that okay, but it's worth it because of this, or it's worth it because of that, or it's worth it because of this. And as God takes that all away, and I'm asking myself, what is this for? I read this book, and this woman is simply faithful. Like, that's it. Like, she doesn't get rewarded. She doesn't get more kids. She doesn't like have this really nice story at the end. She just dies. And it really did like rock my perception of what is important and why we serve Christ. Because she simply was faithful, knowing in no way what the fruit would be, and seeing very small fruit their entire life. Because why? And then we go back to the beginning. She wanted to be used. She wanted to be used by God. And I think that begs the question for us: do we want to be used, or do we want to be comfortable? Do we want to be used, or do we want to be safe? Do we want to be used, or do we want to give our life for our Savior who died for us? Or do we want to live for the world? And I want to read some quotes from her. And I mean, I think it's funny. This is not obviously a biblical example, but this lady should be in the Bible. I mean, she was born too late, but she would have been in the Bible if she lived during that time, okay? This is what she says. A little sacrifice for the cause of Christ is not worth naming, and I feel it a privilege of which I am entirely undeserving, to have had it in my power to sacrifice my all for him who hesitated not to lay down his life for sinners. Like, what a perspective. And then she says this: if I must spend my days in a heathen land, I am a creature of God, and he has an undoubted right to do with me as seems good in his sight. I rejoice that I am in his hands, that he is everywhere present, that he can protect me in one place as well as in another. He has my heart in his hands, and when I am called to face danger, to pass through scenes of terror and distress, he can inspire me with fortitude and enable me to trust him. Jesus is faithful. His promises are precious. Were it not for these considerations, I should, with my present prospects, sink down in despair, especially as no female has, to my knowledge, ever left the shores of America to spend her life among the heathen. But whether I spend my days in India or in America, I desire to spend them in the service of God and to be prepared to spend an eternity in his presence. That's just beautiful. And that's why I say bitter or beautiful. And she didn't look to herself. She looked to Christ, and she clung to the character of God, right? So the complete opposite of what Job's wife did. And that's why I say this book made me feel super stupid and super lame. And I read it, and I was like, I finished it. Corey came home from his trip. I was like, we're fine. We're good. We're not going through anything, actually. We're healthy. Our kids are healthy. We're not scraping boils off of ourselves. So it totally redirected my perspective. And this is 3 things that, if I look back, I think are steps in your response to a trial. So here's my 3, gotta have points, right? Here's my 3 points. The first thing you do if you're in trials, hard times, remember we said at the beginning, public, private, long, short, internal, external. These are so many different things in your life. So think of what that is for you right now. And if you haven't had one, pray that you'll have one. Okay? The first thing is to surrender. Surrender means abandon, submit, relent, yield. It literally means to wave the white flag. Like, I'm done. And it's what's the opposite of that? The opposite of surrendering to God would be to fight God, to resist. Yes, to resist God. And I've gotten in a lot of fights with God. And I've never won. They don't go very well. And often when I do, I wish I had just surrendered sooner. And sometimes I literally physically open my hands in surrender. This means giving up your plans, your life, your hopes, your dreams, your children, your health, all of these things you're saying okay, you have it. And there was a time, like I was telling you, where I was mad. I was mad that was what God had. I wanted to see people get saved. I didn't want to be a part of darkness. I would just ask God, why do I have to be a part of such dark things? And I had to surrender that, and you have to surrender that. Whatever that is for you in your life, you have to give it to God. Because if you don't surrender, first of all, what happens, like Job's wife, you curse God, and it completely changes who you are. It's not neutral. You can't be neutral in a trial. It's not well, I don't know, I'm not worse, but I didn't grow, but I'm not a worse for wear or whatever. Yes, it's one or the other. And can that be a process? Yes. For me, it was a process. I didn't initially responded how I should have. It was a process. But in the end, when it's all said and done, when it's wrapped up and you say I've went through that, I've passed through that, it will have done one of those 2 things. So the first thing is to surrender. And if you don't surrender, you can't do the second thing, which is to seek Christ. This is super simple. Hebrews 12:1 and 2. We can read that. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, laying aside every weight and the sin which so easily entangles us, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. And that looks like a lot of different things. But if you are surrendered, if you are seeking Christ, you will, we know this, right? We are in his word. We are seeking his will. But we're also asking for wisdom, right? We're not I'm by myself, seeking God. No, talk to people, ask for help, ask people what they've done if they're in a similar situation. If no one has gone through that, ask them to pray for you. Seek wisdom from the people in your life. And because I think oftentimes we know we have to read the Bible and pray. Okay, this is hard. I need to read the Bible, but we don't talk to anybody. You need to be open and share the hard things with people that you love and trust and that are more mature than you. Not just your friends or maybe peers, but older, godlier people that can help you walk through those things. I've talked to a lot of people. They're like, well, this, and this, and I don't know what to do. And it's like, well, who have you talked to about it? Well, no one. It's like, well, you're not. That's why it's a test. You need help. You need to ask people to be in your life and get involved in what's hard. And okay, third, serve. This is maybe not what you've heard in regards to trials. So surrender, seek, serve. And I say serve because it really gets your eyes off yourself. I think a lot of times we can use a trial as a cop-out. This is really hard, and I've heard people say, I just don't have enough because of what I'm going through to give. But that I don't see that anywhere in the Bible. I really don't. And that's exactly what Job's wife did. She had her eyes on who? On herself. And this woman, Ann Judson, let's contrast, had her eyes on what? On the character of God and who he was and the beauty of Christ. And it made her serve in incredible ways to people that she didn't even know. It's not well, I can only handle my family right now. She served everybody in her community. People that she had just met. That's why you have to read this book. But I think a lot, and we might say, well, that's a big sacrifice for me right now. And I think that if we read Romans 12, 1 and 2, I think this is really good. I exhort you, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a sacrifice, living holy and pleasing to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may approve what the will of God is, that which is good and pleasing and perfect. So a living sacrifice. When we say, well, that's a big sacrifice for me. Well, you already are. You are the sacrifice. You don't get to pick what you give to God. That's not how it works. We have already given what our whole selves, right? If we are in Christ and we are a new creation, we've already given all of who we are to Christ. We don't get to pick what we give to God or how we serve God. It is our whole life. So if you are in a trial, you don't get to say well, I can't serve right now. So find someone to love, find someone to serve, find someone preferably who has bigger problems than yourself. And that's just that's just my own, I don't know if that's in there, but that's what I think my mom's laughing at me. That is what has always gotten me off of thinking of myself, is serving people that have really true, deep problems. And that's in Albania, that's not hard to find. And I just walk away and think gosh, I'm so blessed. I have so much to thank God for. So if you're really having a hard day and you're really going through something hard, seriously, just go find someone to serve. Find someone to pray for. Find someone to give to. Do something that just gets your eyes off yourself in your own situation. Share the truth. I mean, do you know, what unbelievers are you witnessing to right now? That there's nothing more exciting when you're in the midst of walking through something hard than talking to someone about Christ. Because it just reminds you of what's real and true. And it lets you say, what I'm going through right now, God is doing so much more in the world and for eternity and for heaven. So that would be my challenge. And here's one more quote, and then we'll wrap up. But this is John MacArthur. As you go through one trial, your spiritual muscles are exercised. You are stronger for the next one. That means you can face a greater foe. That means you are more useful. You go through another trial and another trial and another trial, and all those are strengthening and strengthening and strengthening until now your usefulness is on the increase. Your endurance makes you more useful. And then the more useful you are, the more used you are. And the more used you are, the more you accomplish in the power of the Spirit for the glory of God. And the question then would be did Jesus die for you? And did you deserve it? And we know the answers to those questions, right? But the response is thankfulness, and God used me. So if that is our response, we are going to go through hard things. And to finish my story, God really, really did change my heart in those years, from looking to the fruit of what God was doing in Albania to saying to my husband and I saying to each other, we just have to be faithful. And the fruit is not what we're going for. That's like the cherry on top, right? Like if we see someone get saved, praise the Lord. If our church grows, praise the Lord. But that is not what we're here for. We're here because God has called us, and we're here to be faithful. And I still have to open my hand and say, if it all burns down, like if everybody walks away and our church turns on us and we have to leave and it all goes down, He's still good. And that is super freeing for me, being there, because I can just be faithful. I can just be faithful to what He's doing in Albania. And unlike Ann Judson, I would say God has given us so much back. Our church is healthier than it has ever been. We are seeing people grow deep. There are new families coming. There hasn't been men in our church in the whole time we've been there. He's raising up men. We have seen more growth and strengthening and encouraging times in the last year probably than we ever have. And our perspective on what is important and what true growth is so different. And He's totally changed the way we've looked at so many things. And so in a very shocking way, I can say I'm so glad that all that happened. I'm so glad that our church was refined. I'm so glad that we were refined. I'm so glad for how, the darkness, because God used it to declare who He was and to show His righteousness to so many people. And that is always our prayer, right? That what we go through and the things we experience in life will make us more beautiful and more useful for Christ.